Okay, it's about time for us to get started. We have um, we should have a couple of people. Yes, we have a couple of people online who cannot be here tonight for various reasons. I will be Zooming these classes. It'll be a little different than some because we're going to have a lot of discussion in these classes. So I hope that we can have a good audio on this. I'm going to have to sit fairly close to my computer because the microphone is anything but stellar, and I forgot to bring a good microphone in. So the purpose of this class, Communication Arts, is to talk about exactly that, communication. Come in, have a seat. Talk about communication. What is communication? Well, there's an old saying that the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has occurred. And I think we've all seen that in our lives. We've seen times when we've been talking to, say, the other person in our life, whether it's a parent or a child or a spouse or whatever, a longtime partner, and you realize all of a sudden that two of you were talking like you're faced 180 degrees apart. You're just not communicating. And there's lots of reasons for that. We're going to go through that. I have a couple of handouts, which I will send electronic copies to the people who are coming in online. But we have a couple of things that we will use to talk about this issue. And this particular week, we're focusing on the material that you can find in the shell under Readings and Tools, Chapter 6 of the text.
I have a question.
It is 71 pages long, so I don't expect you to print it out, but you can download it and look at it on your computer. One of the things I wanted to start off with is that we've changed the format of our classes quite a bit. In fact, Hope, right? Would you please close the door? Because I think everyone who's going to be here is here. Thank you.
Can you just give Hope my handout?
Paying attention to our class instead of Karen.
Can you give Hope my handout?
But you've seen some cosmetic changes already in the homepage for the class. Those of you who are in medical classes as well may have noticed that the medical classes haven't changed yet, and they haven't. They won't be changing until Mod 6, I think, or maybe 8. Might be Mod 8. The other aspects of this class, of these classes, is we're trying to eliminate as much as possible the differences between classes that you take online and the same classes taught on campus. That has been a problem in the past. I teach in the medical program. I was originally hired to teach all the pharmacy classes down in Denver. And what I found was that my students who took part of the pharmacy sequence online did not get the material that we were covering at all. And so I think this is an effort that is more than just worthwhile. And I hope we can make it work. But I will warn you, this is the first mod we've done this. There will be glitches. We're in it together. And I ask your patience with me, and I plan to be patient with you as we go through these changes. If you see things that you think don't work or think need to be improved, let me know. We have a mechanism for getting that information up in the organization to where we can overcome the glitches that inevitably come with a change of this nature. You'll notice that we don't have a whole lot of points in the class. Part of that's because I have not finalized our assignments and assessments yet. I've got an assignment for this week. I'm working on this week's assessment. There will be a discussion, an assessment, and an assignment every week for the first 3 weeks. The last week, of course, there will be a final exam. Your assignments will mostly be writing papers. So they will be graded by a rubric. We have been through, from discussion earlier today, I know there's some issues with the way rubrics are used. We have been through a lot of training on rubrics in the last couple of months as faculty members, because some of us use them, let me just say, more effectively than others. And all of us want to be able to use them to give you the proper feedback and explain why on a 100-point assignment you only get 85 when you think you did a 100-point job. And part of our training is to provide good feedback to you. So another thing I want to know is if you feel you're not getting good feedback from me, let me know. That's my job. And I like to think I do my job well. And if I'm not giving you the good feedback that you need, then I'm not. So don't hesitate. I am quite capable of taking criticism as long as it's polite. Criticism doesn't have to be nasty. If it gets nasty, well, I was a platoon sergeant. I know how to be nasty. And you don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. So let's keep it really at a high level in our conversations. If you feel like I'm not doing something that needs to be done, let me know. It's probably totally inadvertent. And in fact, a handout that you're going to get from me today, which is not part of this course, I just accidentally, well, not really, my what I call my incipient son-in-law sent it to us last night. It's about the stories we tell each other in our conversations with those close to us and how they can be, I mean, just not even in the ballpark, much less left field. They're just really out of it and they have nothing to do with what the other people in our lives mean. I'm going to give you a copy of that because it's actually a very good read. But the point of that is that I don't want you to be making up things about me. I'm pretty transparent, pretty straightforward. I've been around a long time. I've given up all the games and other things that we used to play when I was a kid. The mind games with each other. I still like to play games, by the way. But I've given up on the little mind games that we try to play because they really have no whatsoever in all of our lives. So I want your feedback, and I want it throughout the course. If you don't want to stand up in class and say, you're really screwing things up, Mike, then the answer is email it to me.
Hey, Mike. Can you turn your video on?
Email regularly. So email things to me if you want. Now, going back to rubrics, we've been being trained to use rubrics as a way to give good, solid feedback. I've got 11 students in this class. It's probably the second biggest class I've taught here in Fort Collins. I had a class one time down in Denver that was 28. That was a terror. I didn't even have 28 seats in the classroom. But remember that when I'm grading, it may take me a few days to get through all the papers. So if you don't get feedback right away, please understand that I've got 11 of these things to look at. And I actually take them seriously. If you're going to put the time and effort into writing a paper, I'm going to give you the courtesy of reading it instead of just, oh yeah, it's the right number of pages. It looks like the right format. Good references. Bingo, you got your 100. No. I really want to help you. This is a communication class, and something like I just described is not communicating. Yes. Okay, just a second. Done? Okay. That better?
Yeah, thank you.
Let's see. I've got some, yeah, and I'm real bad about not looking at the chats very well, so I apologize for that. I've got the chat screen up so that I can see them as they come in now. Thank you. There's another thing. Don't hesitate to find any way you need to communicate with me. I'm pretty open about this. I'm pretty laid back about most things. Unless you start messing with my wife or daughter, then I'm not laid back. But other than that, pretty much I'm a person that's easy to get along with. In fact, in the 7.5 years I've been teaching here at College America in Denver and in Fort Collins here, I've had exactly one student that I couldn't get along with. So I sort of figured that was that student's issue rather than me. Now, maybe I'm wrong. That could be my story that I'm telling myself, right? So the class, the discussions, you're going to start off with a discussion every week. Discussion posts are just like you remember, though. They haven't changed. Your first post is due Wednesday night. One of the things that has changed is now we have been very much trained that we are to do the first post in any discussion forum, partly to sort of set the tone and partly to get some ideas out there and maybe even expand on the discussion. Do not feel that once you reach 150 words, you stop. If you have more to say, say it. Again, if you write it, I'll read it. And I will sometimes, not always, but I will sometimes comment on it. I can't promise with a large class that everyone's going to get a comment from me about every post, but I will endeavor to give feedback on all those. We have a couple of children waving at us now in this video, and it's always nice to see kids. So then by Saturday night, you should do your responses as well. Discussions and assignments in my classes will stay open 1 week after the due date. If you, for whatever reason, valid reason, cannot get an assignment done, in that time period, you need to talk to me because they will close. I will also say one other thing. Occasionally, when I'm setting up assignments, I'll forget to check the little box that says you have to submit something. So if you can't find the submission box to an assignment that requires a submission, email it to me. That always works. Okay. And there will be a lot of reading and a lot of videos. We have a bunch of videos that are associated with this class, and you can find them each week in the readings and tools. I've gone through this week's videos, and they're actually pretty good. But I will say that you'll get, I think, a bit more out of them if you do the reading for this week first. Okay? Because there's an assumption that you know some of the stuff that's in the reading in the videos. So I suggest that. But the videos are very useful. Videos are also a good distraction. There are all sorts of learning styles. I know this. I have my own learning style, which is really predicated on a prehistoric model. Because of course, when I went to school, we didn't have things like this. Computers, internet, all that stuff. I was telling some people that we didn't have computers, we didn't have calculators, that I thought that I'd take my old expensive slide rule, which some of you may know what is, and some of you may have never seen one, and frame it as a museum piece, because nobody uses them anymore. But that's what we got along with then. I am very jealous of you as students having the resources available to you that you do. we used to have to go to the library, pick an old volume off the shelf, blow the dust off it, and then go through it page by page to find what we needed. If we were lucky, it was a paper copy. If we weren't, it was on microfiche, and we had to sit in front of a microscope to read it. So these are things that probably some of you have never seen, but it was an old storage mechanism. Now, of course, everything's online. And so I really find that my learning style is predicated on what I grew up with. I can remember being just incredibly excited when I was in graduate school and finally got access to an electric typewriter. Before that, I had an old manual that was probably, well, it was older than I was. So, and in fact, I think I even still have that old manual sitting in my basement. That's another one I probably ought to frame. But the technologies have changed, and they've changed in many ways for the better. But we'll talk about some of the technologies that aren't necessarily for the better if they're not used to good effect. So the other thing we have is, and some of you may have seen these in some of the online classes. All of our classes now have daily checkpoints. There are 6 of them a week. They're online for one 24-hour period from midnight to midnight. So if you haven't done today's daily checkpoint, make sure you do it before you leave class tonight. I know at least one person has. But if the rest of you get it done before you leave class, there are 6 a week, Monday through Saturday. You get Sunday off. Aren't we generous? And I would suggest that you just go on every day. It really doesn't take very long to answer them, but go on every day and answer the checkpoint. It's 5 points if you get it right. If you don't get it right, you don't get any points, but you do. It's noted in our system that you've actually logged in for the day. It's part of our attendance policies here. You are required to do at least 4 of them a week. So you may as well just do all 6. So if for some reason, the baby's sick and you've been at the hospital all day and you haven't gotten to your checkpoint that day, don't sweat it. One checkpoint is not going to kill your grade. Okay? And as long as you get 4 in a week, we're happy. But try to do them all. This is something, as I say, some of you may have seen that already in online classes. But it is now going to be gradually worked into all of them. As I say, the medical classes, they'll get worked in Mod 8, I think, is what the current plan is. And we'll see, because we're still trying to, they're much more complicated classes to move into an environment where we're trying to rationalize IU and the on-ground experience. So we're working on transition for that, because I know I've got mostly medical students here and the rest are computer science. So you guys, all of your classes have been converted. So you'll see all of them be this new design. So that's really what the changes are. As I said, please be patient with us. We're all struggling with how to really work with this new model, because it does. We have some other constraints that are put on us as well. But really, the thing that I want you to take away is that we're trying to make the educational experience here a little more unified and transparent across all of the campuses. So questions, anyone? By the way, I didn't even introduce myself. I'm Mike Burke. Some of you, I promised you'd see me again. I didn't think it would be this soon.
So do you want us to address you as Mike?
Last week.
Do you want us to address you as Mike?
You probably, the medical students here will probably see me again because I teach a bunch of the medical classes. As for the computer science, I also teach algebra, statistics, and our professional development class. So you'll probably see me again there too. So this is, and we're also getting some more new teachers because we lost a couple, one to retirement, one got a dream job in Texas, and so he's leaving. So, yeah, we'll miss them, both of them, but we'll have to figure out how to do that, how to deal with it. Let's see. As for Amber, no, I don't hear you. Is your microphone on? Because
Yeah, it's on.
Okay. Let me.
Do you have your volume up?
Okay.
How about now?
Okay. Now, yeah, when I tried to turn your microphone on, I turned mine off. So
Yeah.
now I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Questions about the class? None? I will be recording each class as a Zoom session, because I know we have one student who's not going to be able to be here at all this mod, so that she can actually participate in the class. Part of the reason I record it is so that if you want to go back and review it, you can, if for some strange reason you want to do that. But the other is, though, I want you to understand that simply because I record a class doesn't give you permission not to come. Because really the interactions here, we're going to see about playing perhaps some communication games and some things that maybe you're familiar with, and maybe if I can find a couple that you're unfamiliar with, we can have some fun with that. Because, as I said earlier, the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it's been achieved. We often have no concept of how people are taking what we say. Another bit is one of the audio sessions, or one of the videos in this week, is a young psychology student at Carleton College, and she gave a TED Talk on their campus about communication and about learning and about the different types of communication. We talk about verbal and nonverbal communication. Well, there's also vocal communication. Verbal communication can be talking to each other over a cup of coffee, but verbal communication can also be written. And written takes many forms in our society now. It used to be, if you had written communication, you wrote a memo or a letter, and it was given to whoever it was supposed to go to. Now, we can write whatever we want, flash it up onto Facebook, and the whole bloody world can see it. So what we've done is we've really made the verbal part of communication, we've divided into two parts. I want to talk about that a bit. The verbal and vocal are both about words that we use, and words are symbols. They have no intrinsic meaning. The meaning is within us, what we've learned that they meant. And that's why We can be talking about something, and I'll use a word that was common perhaps when I was a kid. Right now, one of the ones, when I was in high school and college, if you called someone a nerd, it was an insult. Now it's a compliment. Oh man, you're so smart. You know that stuff. It's a very different meaning and take on it. But words have changed over in their usage, and we have to be careful when we use a word that's perhaps a little bit can be taken in a way that we don't mean. We have to be very careful about using terminology, because I guarantee you, if you're in a group of people and you say something that can be taken wrongly or badly, somebody will. And it's because of the stories they've got in their head. Okay. But 93% of communication is nonverbal, body language, expression, actions. If you're sitting talking to somebody and they're looking around the room, looking down at the lap, maybe playing on their cell phone, are they paying attention to you? Absolutely not. Are they going to hear what you're saying? It's going in because their ears work, but God knows how it's being processed in the brain. Give you an example. This is out of medicine. We think of general anesthesia when somebody goes in for major surgery as being something that, just shuts off all their body functions. And so we have them hooked up to heart-lung machines and keeping them running. Guess what? Their eyes, their ears, their noses, even their mouths still work. So surgeons have learned the hard way not to make remarks about their patients on the operating table. Now you think about what's surgery? You're taking a piece of cold steel and driving it into flesh. That's kind of a harsh picture, but that's what it is. You're brutalizing a human being. And a lot of times surgeons would get around this with humor on the operating table. They'd make humorous, they thought, nasty remarks about the patients. And then the patients would wake up absolutely despising their surgeon because they heard every word of it. They don't remember it, but their brain processed it. This guy hates me. He thinks I'm ugly and my mother dresses me funny, and they hate him. Surgeons have learned to keep their big mouths shut other than hand me the sponge, that sort of thing. The stuff they need to, because the ears work. The eyes work. People will open their eyes in surgery and look around, and you'd think they were fully awake. They're not. They can talk unless they've got a tube in their mouths. They can talk. So all of those functions work, and they all pick up different signals. When we're looking at someone that we're talking to, what do we look at? Well, we can look at the face. What do we look at on the face? How do you know someone's listening to you? You look them in the eyes, right? You look them in the eyes, and if you're talking and their pupils dilate, they're not paying attention. Or if they've got that blank look that says, I don't care what you're saying. Have you seen that before? Yeah. Especially in your kids? Yeah. Those of you who have kids that are old enough to feel that way? Yep. It's an experience. You learn a lot about communication and miscommunication. So, but the startling thing for me from that presentation is that 93% of our communication is nonverbal. That means that if you're doing Facebook or email or Twitter or any of this stuff, you're trying to do that 7% and trying to get a message across with only 7% of the tools that you have. Because your nonverbal language, your body language, your facial expressions, when you're talking, really have an impact on the people around you. One of the things we learn is things not to do. I'll give you an example. I'm a chemist by education. My degrees are in chemistry. And when I was an undergrad taking my first degree, I sort of liked analytical chemistry. You know, I was picking things apart, figuring out what they were, and then figuring out how to put them back together, that sort of thing. It was a lot of fun because it's a puzzle, and I've always loved puzzles. But my analytical chemistry teacher came in the first day and he says, okay, you're going to do presentations in the class regularly, and here's how you do it. He said, you will write things out, and then you will stand in front of the podium like this, and you will read everyone you wrote in at a steady pace. I'm not an analytical chemist, because you can imagine that most of us went to sleep in his classes because that's how he delivered his lectures. He thought that's how it was. Actually, that was the way he could do it because he was a real nervous Nelly. He could not relax. He really had some issues, and that's how he overcame them. And most of us in that class, we had a couple of people that, despite him, decided that that's what they liked, but still most of us said, oh dear, how are we going to get through this class? And it was hard. And it was boring because when you tune out monotony, you tune out that steady pace at a monotone. It's terrible, terrible, terrible. If you've ever seen it at all, you know, it's like the old computer voices, you know. Those things were awful. At least now they can put some inflection. My wife got a new computer and Cortana was on it. And annoyingly perky, but nonetheless, at least some inflection in the voice, you know. So they've changed things, but nonetheless, I still can't see that our analytical chemistry teacher ever changed. But that's not a way to do it. That's not a way to talk and get listened to, because the other side of communication, of course, communication is not one way. You can't communicate to a vacuum. So there's always someone on the receiving end of that communication. That was Katie, by the way. Just making sure that everyone was here. You have to have someone on the receiving end. And that is a critical aspect of communicating that we forget. That communication is between people. You know, we think we're communicating with our dog, but there's old jokes, you know, about that. You know, what does the dog hear versus what the cat hears, you know. But we don't really. I mean, the dog will learn to respond, and in very good ways. I like dogs, so I'm not saying anything about dogs or cats or anything else. I like animals, but we don't communicate in the same way with something that can't really communicate back. And by that I mean the real aspect of communication is not, oh, it's time for dinner. That'll get a dog coming every single time. It'll get a cat to look at you and go, yeah, who says? But the dog will come. So, but we're talking about communication of ideas and thoughts. And we also need to remember that humans communicate differently than any other species as far as we know. I don't rule out the fact that animals can communicate, which they appear to do pretty well, actually. But it's not clear that they're communicating about abstracts. They can't discuss quantum mechanics, for instance. They don't have the vocabulary. So, at least as far as we know. We have, but we are the only animals that really communicate the way that we do. The communication of abstract ideas and our communication styles vary all over the place. So one of the things that the textbook has, chapter 6, is interpersonal communication processes, is the title of the chapter. Interpersonal communication processes. Now, this sounds like a really weird and difficult title, but really, it is about how we talk to each other, and the styles with which we communicate. Communication is often a delicate thing to do. So I'd like to really start off and go around the room and have people. First off, I don't know all of you. I remember some of you from having subbed for Karen, but I don't remember all of you or know all of you. So I'm going to ask that everybody introduce themselves and tell us about a time tell us about a time that you're comfortable talking about when you had a communication difficulty. Okay? You want to start? Okay. Okay. I will note that actually. Sorry.
Somewhat recently on, I had a supervisor at work who kept having to retrain on the basic job on an almost daily basis.
We cannot hear them on Zoom.
Ah,
I don't
okay.
hear anything
So
you
I'm
say
going to
on
ask as you do that, if we've got, connected up to, we'll see if this is going to work. Okay. So can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Better. Great. Okay. So go ahead, Chad.
Chad Long is talking about how I recently had a supervisor at work who I had to retrain almost daily on our basic processes. There was some sort of communication breakdown there between having somebody show them and tell them and having a document you could reference every day. It's still never quite sunk in. Definitely struggled to communicate, broke down somewhere along the way.
Okay. So that was a difficulty communicating. Okay. Okay. Trevor, you have something you'd like to say? Okay.
My name is Daniel Sullivan. Can't really think of a really good example for communication troubles, except for the fact that I sometimes get into arguments with my family and try to ignore it as best I can. Because it's just almost an everyday basis. So I just try to avoid and not talk at all whatsoever to my family if I make great.
Okay. Great. I hope you want to take it up from that table.
Sure. Communication difficulty with my son this morning. I contributed to the fact that it was a text message. I tried real hard not to share it.
Okay.
Is it me now?
Sure. Why not, Megan?
Whoever speaks.
I'm Megan. Probably the most frequent communication occurs are my kids or my husband. I don't really know which one is worse. I mean, my husband is from Trinidad, so coming from basically a third world country and your teens, there's a bit of a communication error in and of itself, and then we've both been to war, so that plays a pretty big role in like when one of us is struggling, you don't wanna like lean on the other person too hard, and then they start to struggle, and then we just, you know, we're friends, so it works.
Should always be
So,
married to a
yeah.
friend.
Yeah, communication is hard though, I feel like with anybody. You think you have good communication with people, but when you really sit back and evaluate it, usually just the people that you don't interact with as often, that you think you have the best communication. Which, like you said, is in everything.
Can be. Can be. Thank you.
I'm Felicia, and mine's pretty much whenever I text, sometimes the emotion doesn't come through, so with communication. If I'm like talking to my boyfriend, we can start having an argument. We're not even close. He always thinks that you can't tell how somebody's talking through text.
Right. No nonverbal cues. No tone of voice, no expression, no body language. It's just words on a screen.
You get like crazy.
Michael, most recent, she was, I don't know if my manager was just having a day or what, but started yelling at me, like, in front of everybody, customers.
Okay, can you speak up a little louder, please? Because they're having trouble hearing.
And that was really, it's that communication, we didn't really try to communicate, and I didn't either, we just blew up on each other.
Okay.
My name is Chelsea. My biggest communication issue is having to explain myself. The same people over and over, not getting frustrated.
Okay.
I'm Elisa. My trouble communicating is becoming more market. There's seeing new things like that's pretty
Okay.
Wow.
Okay. All right. So Stephanie and Amber, would you like to open up your mics and talk? I see Amber's got her
Yeah.
mic open, so you want to go first?
Yeah. So you said you want to know our name and our troubled communication time?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm Amber, and so I used to work at a retirement home when I was 16, and I would address them as like girls instead of women, and they found that very offensive. So I just had to watch how I worded things to them since they were like an older age than I was at the time, and so I learned how to like communicate differently between like in the kitchen and then out on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I got.
That's actually a good example, and I like that one because there again, it's you said you were young and you didn't know, and that's a problem. My 98-year-old mother-in-law lives with us, and she was an Air Force wife. She lived in Japan, Alaska, all over the United States. And when her husband died young, she educated both of her daughters. She's a very accomplished lady. And we go to a restaurant, and there's some 23-year-old waitress who calls her sweetie, has never met her. And I find that offensive. And I think that, there again, it's communication. What's the communication message? Oh, you're just an old person, you don't count. Or you're childish because you're old. Well, some old people do get childish. Not my mother-in-law. No, not at all. But it's really kind of, and I've seen this happen. So thank you for that, Amber. Okay, Stephanie?
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I hope I'm interpreting this correctly as far as my example goes, but the example I have is when I worked at a gas station, and at the pump you have to, when you use your credit card, you have to put in a zip code. And I was the cashier. So a lady came in and she was very irate that the pump was not taking her zip code, and she wanted to know why. So I tried to explain to her it's for fraud protection on her sake, so that if she lost her card and someone picked it up and tried to fill up their gas tank, they wouldn't be able to unless they knew her zip code. She was just very irate and didn't understand the way I was trying to explain it, and threw her credit card at me and kind of walked out of the gas station. So I feel in that instance, I guess I didn't explain myself properly to her, or I could have explained myself better for her to understand and for her not to be so frustrated with why we did need her zip code to fill up at the pump.
Okay, well, thank you. And there's a good example of someone who is taking her irritation out on an innocent third party. You know, that's a communications technique that people have. Because in our society, we have gotten to the point where it's okay to just let it all hang out. That used to be totally unacceptable in our society. When I was a kid, if you behaved like that, you're very likely to get a broken nose. Nowadays, if you broke somebody's nose for behaving like that, they'd have you arrested, or they'd pull out a .38 special and shoot you. So we don't do, we think we can just misbehave quite a bit differently than when I was younger. And so that's part of the whole issue with communication. Thanks a lot, Stephanie.
You're welcome.
Okay. So that, some of the things that we've seen here really have to do with disagreement, conflict, and dealing with contentious situations. And unfortunately, there's a lot of that. All we have to do, if we look around us anywhere, you see people driving down the road and they get mad at you because they do something, you blow your horn and they flip you off. I mean, that's not a particularly useful reaction. But it also doesn't solve whatever the issue is. Conflict is not bad. Let's dissect the word, because conflict management is really the subject of this week's discussion, and one of the possibilities for this week's assignment. So conflict. Let's just talk about conflict. Conflict is just two things that aren't in agreement. You can have a conflict when you and your significant other are not agreeing on what restaurant you want to go to that night if you're going to go out. That's a conflict because it's not the same. But out of conflict, out of that clash of ideas can come, an opportunity to really communicate and do things without turning it into contention. There's a difference between conflict and contention. Contention is when conflict gets escalated past the point of rationality. And contention is when we have things like people throwing credit cards on the counter at us. Contention is when you have people who flip you off on the road. There's an anonymous one. There's, again, nonverbal communication. We used to refer to it as digital communication when I was a kid, but nonverbal communication, but it conveys nothing other than your lack of ability to deal with a situation. I'm not saying that there's right or wrong there, but it's not a good way to handle a situation. You wouldn't if you were standing in line at the grocery store and having a discussion, you probably wouldn't use that gesture on the person you were talking with because it wouldn't come up. And because you're very close, you're doing that other 93% of the communication. you've got the body language, you've got the expression, you've got everything to do with it, the stance you're using, all of it. And so you're sending all sorts of signals that allow other people to pick up on it. So conflict management styles, we've heard some. We all have our own style of conflict management. And we have conflict all the time. Anytime you get two people together, they're going to disagree about something, even if it's what time of day it is. They're going to disagree about something. And how they handle it is not only a measure of their ability to communicate, but a measure of their maturity and their ability to think first. You know, the old saw about make sure that your brain is running before you put your mouth in gear. You know, it's something that we forget. People just immediately start yelling at each other. When in reality, if you just think for even as little as a few seconds, you wouldn't say some of the things that first come to mind. I can't tell you how often I bite my tongue because my first response, I'm human, I'm just like everybody else. My first response when somebody says something is to attack because I'm feeling attacked. And then if I think about it for a second, or sometimes a few seconds, I realize maybe that's not true. So let's think about how I'm going to respond. You can always escalate a situation, and you can always de-escalate. Sometimes de-escalation is saying, we can't talk about this now. Said in a calm voice. Usually people will, first off, that's not what they're expecting. And anytime you catch someone totally off guard, they will stop what they're doing. Okay, when you're having a conversation. So that's not what they're expecting. So often that is all that it takes to completely de-escalate the situation. Some of the videos you see will have some ideas about that. But in terms of conflict resolution, conflict management, there's huge whole science of conflict resolution. That's really not what this class is, but really it's about how do we use communication to overcome differences. The differences can be as little as I said, you know, where are we going to go to dinner tonight? What do you want for dinner tonight? To, you know, major purchase like a house purchase or a car or something like that. You will have differences of opinion, and differences of opinion by definition are conflicting. And there is nothing wrong with conflict. Nothing at all. You just don't want to pick it all the time. But there's nothing wrong with that because by that, it gives you the opportunity then to communicate, to talk. So conflict resolution takes several different forms. There's the avoidance, which is what you're doing with your family. Nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong really with any of them as long as they're not taken to an extreme because they're different styles. There's an aggressive response. You know, it's the, there's no food in the house. Well, you didn't go to the store. You know, some of you may have heard that one. And so how you respond to that then tells you which direction you're going to go in the conversation. There is the compromise. Oh, well, you know, what do you want? You know, kind of thing. There is a type of resolution that is more along the lines of let's sit down and discuss it. The textbook, I've forgotten the fifth one. I had it all memorized a few minutes ago. Guess what? So much for memorization. So it's basically here on page. There's a little grid. Yeah. Okay. 415. Got it. And accommodating. And the aggressive, what I call aggressive is the competing, is what he calls competing. Competing is probably a better term because aggression or aggressive is a negative term. And what we want to do is frame these things in more of a positive way of looking at how to resolve conflicts. So we've got compromising, we've got collaboration. You'll read in my post on this week's discussion that my choice is a variation on collaboration that we use in my community. We call it consultation, which is really a way of collaborating with others to come up with a solution to an issue. Okay, and it can be used anywhere from where do we go for dinner to to something major business decisions in your life. Compromising is something that a lot of people do. Compromise is often thought of as I give up something, you give up something. The problem with compromise is that nobody gives up something that's core to their value system. And if they're asked to do so or pushed into doing so, then the situation is never really resolved. But there are a lot of people that believe that, and in fact, it's taught in all the schools of negotiation. I used to negotiate enormous contracts in the pharmaceutical industry, and we always used compromise as our example. And I can't tell you how many of those contracts ended up in court. I can't tell you how many times I was sitting in lawyers' offices being deposed about contracts that went bad because one side or the other felt that they had been really shafted and pushed into something that was not in their best interest. So it works for a lot of things. Sure, you can compromise on where to go for dinner. Yeah, we had Mexican last night. I'd like to have something different tonight. Okay, that's a good idea. What do we want to have? So the accommodating is something that I use a lot with my wife, because a lot of things I don't really care. Where do you want to go for dinner tonight? Well, I'd like to go, let's just say I want to go for Thai food tonight. We had Asian a couple of days ago. I'd like something else. Even though I might have really wanted Thai food, I might say, okay, if it's that important to you, I don't care. Where do you want to go? That's an accommodating strategy. And it works when you have no investment in the answer, but the other person might. And there's nothing wrong with that either. If it becomes something you do all the time, then you need to ask yourself, just what's going on? Why am I just giving in all the time? Not to say that you have to stand up and fight all the time, but any kind of personal relationship, there ought to be give and take. And so those kinds of conflicts work. So it is now 7 o'clock. We're supposed to take our 15-minute break. So let's take our break, and we'll come back here in 15 minutes. And I'm going to shut the recording of this off. The meeting itself will continue. But I'm going to shut the recording off.
Just really quick, is there a book for the class? Because I went to the school today to pick up a book and they told me there was not one.
I'm not hearing you, Stephanie.
Oh, I put a link to the full text in the course chat, Michelle.
Is there a book for your class? Because I was told when I went there today that there is not.
There is not a book, Stephanie. There is. It's online. You'll find it under in chapters. The 4 chapters we'll be going over of the Jones text
Okay.
are downloadable in each week of the mod.
Okay.
Okay, so you'll download it. The first one is chapter 6. It's 71 pages long, so you don't want to print it, but you can download it and read it that way.
Okay.
Did we used to have a textbook then?
Yes, there used to be textbooks, Amber, for this class, but they have decided to go to online textbooks as part of the change to the new class structure. So
Is
you'll
there any
see
way
that
that we
with
can
most of the
request
classes.
one? Because there's no way I'm going to be able to focus on a computer to read and actually learn and memorize.
Okay. On Wednesday when you come in, talk to me.
Okay.
Okay. We can accommodate that.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see, where am I? Not sure how I can get back to this. Okay, I've resumed the recording. You're looking very relaxed, Amber.
I am. I'm so tired.
Yeah, I bet. How did things go with your mom?
It was my dad, but good. The drive was the worst part.
Okay, well, I hope things continue to go well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's get some feedback from you over the things I was talking about earlier. This shouldn't be just from me to you. I'd like these classes to be more collaborative. I mean, because if it is about communication. So let's try some of that on for size and see how it works. So, any comments, any questions, any thoughts?
Having to do daily check-ins for 2 classes on top of full-time work and being here 4 nights a week is going to be rough.
Yes, I can understand that. And if that turns into a problem, I would suggest that the person who needs to know that really is Katie or Paul. Paul is your dean, right? Yes. So talk to one of them. We're not. It's we say as I say that the daily checkpoints you should be able to do in just a short period of time, no more than 5 minutes. But I understand finding 5 minutes sometimes is not the easiest thing on the planet, especially if you have lots to do and a job and everything. And I run into that. I said earlier that that my 98-year-old mother-in-law lives with us, and basically that ties us to the house. One of us has to be there all the time, or we have to hire somebody in. And it can mean that I can't find time to turn around sometimes from being a care person. So I understand, but as I say, talk to Paul or Katie if you need to about that, because that needs to go back up the line. Okay. Other comments?
I found it interesting. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I found it interesting that 93% of our communication is nonverbal. I didn't know it was like that high, I guess. I thought it was more about how you worded things and the tone of voice, not necessarily like your gestures or things like that. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. I was startled by that too. But the more I thought about it, our voice is a part of it, and our body language includes our tone of voice when we're speaking, as well as our facial expressions, our gestures, and even our very stance as we're talking to people says something. So yeah, I was surprised, and I have not. I mean, I just listened to that video in which this woman said that, and I haven't had time to go start doing some of my own investigation, because one of the things that I believe in is don't take everything somebody says to you at face value. Log it away as, okay, that's something I've heard. If I'm going to really integrate it, then I want to check it out and be sure that it's factual. And that's something I encourage all of you to do, especially if you read anything on the internet. And especially if it's somebody who has a message to deliver. And we see this with politicians all the time. You have to check them all the time. Doesn't matter what flavor they are. They will say things that have nothing to do with reality. So you have to check those things. But when you're talking with other people and they say something that's just not, that you're really not sure you believe, check it out. There's nothing wrong with that. As I say, I'm jealous. We have tools today that I would have given, well, not my right arm, but I would have given a lot to have when I was in school, because it's now easy to do that. It also means that we're cluttered up with junk. So we'll that'll be part of the rest of this course to talk about, what to do about that particular issue. But yeah, thank you. That's good feedback.
A lot of access to signal, but also a lot of access to a whole lot of noise.
Sure. Yeah. Right. Well, when you consider that the amount of information that's generated every day is actually probably greater than the total contents of the Library of Congress. And a lot of that information is just useless stuff. I mean, I'm including all of the Facebooks and Twitter posts, Instagram stuff as well. But I'm also including all of the blogs and opinion pieces that people throw out, some of which arguably can be put just as strictly opinion and having nothing to do with fact. But if you're confronted with it, go check it out. It can be difficult, but check it out. Okay. Anything? What else? The silence, the deafening silence.
It's like, who's gonna break first?
Yeah, who's
That's
going to
right.
break first? Yeah.
You can
So
see
I
it
took
when you
one
drop
for the
off,
team.
break it.
And broke first. No, that's actually a communications tool as well. Silence. I did a lot of in my time in the pharmaceutical industry. I did a lot of negotiations with the Japanese, and they're kind of interesting group to negotiate with, because they understand something that a lot of us Europeans and Americans don't, and that is that silence is a very good tool. They also know that if you're in negotiations, contract negotiations or anything else, and they just sit there and look at you after you make a proposal, you'll negotiate with yourself, usually to their advantage. So I learned that trick. And at one point I was negotiating a big contract with a Japanese company, and we were sitting in Osaka. And the silence went on for almost 10 minutes before they finally spoke and made a counter proposal. But that's what it took. And I tell you what, biting my tongue for that long was difficult. I will admit it. I'm a European American, Silence has to be filled. And if it has to be filled with my voice, that's what gets done, right? But I learned that. Silence as a weapon is not good. Okay. The silent treatment, you get into a fight with someone and you won't talk to them for a week. That's not communication. But silence can be effective. Sometimes being silent should be accompanied by listening, because listening is the other half of a communication. One of you has to listen to the other. You can't both talk at the same time. Well, I've seen it done. Neither one gets very far. But listening is a critical part. What is the other person saying? what is their body language? What are they saying to me with the way they're sitting, with I said something and all of a sudden they go, that says something to me. Because I know I have just said something that upset them by just my change in posture. So the silence and listening is critical, and that's another aspect of any sort of conflict resolution is listening to the other person. What is their concern? What is it that they are really saying to you? What is it they really want? And more importantly, what is their management style? Because if you are an accommodating type and they are an avoiding type, you're going to be looking at the walls as they go by for days, because neither one of you will come to any sort of solution if you don't understand how the other person thinks. Is this necessary in every situation? No, it isn't. If you're talking, again, where do we go for dinner? It's not necessary to turn it into a brawl. It's not necessary to say, oh, well, what is his management style for these discussions? You don't need to know that for some things. But if you're in something important, and again, I'm talking about on the job, you're negotiating possibly for a new position in the company, you have to have some sort of meeting and a discussion. It really is useful if you know how the other person generally handles things. Because all of us use all of those 5 styles of conflict resolution, conflict management at various times and with various people. As you get to the end of this chapter, you'll be talking about what he calls disclosure, which is how much do you and the other party know about each other? What part isn't known? The more you know about each other, then the more likely you are to be able to resolve conflicts, come to agreement, because you will understand how they think. Husband and wife. I've been married to my wife for over 40 years. We pretty much know how each other think by now. Okay. We still have occasional disagreements, but nothing major. And our kids, our daughters are 33 and 30. By now, it goes back to what someone told us one time about her children. She said, when my kids become 30, they're no longer my kids, they're just a close friend of the family. Which, by that, I think it was a case of, I will not treat them like children anymore. I will treat them like the adults they are. And I expect them not to treat me like a parent, but like the adult I am. So it's a different kind of relationship. I always thought that was interesting, because we have a pretty good relationship with both of our daughters. As a result, we can talk. We occasionally get into real good battles still over some things. But that's family dynamic, strictly. And it always ends on a positive note. Even if it takes a few minutes to do that. But we always make that effort to end things on a positive note when there's any sort of conflict. So let's keep going. Anyone else have anything to say? We've gotten through the silent part. Now you can talk. I've broken the ice. Surely there's some thoughts out here.
Tuki doesn't actually work.
Yeah, well, we'll get relaxed and we'll get you to open up, because in reality, this is supposed to be a collaborative effort. I will admit this is the first time I've taught this class. So this is a new experience for me. This is the first time you've taken this class, so it's a new experience for you. The advantage I have is that I already knew a lot of the material about interpersonal interactions. I'm still learning. There's stuff here I didn't know. I'm not going to say I know it all by any stretch of the imagination. But I already knew a lot of this. So I actually felt I could get a discussion going and maybe get some ideas from people, get some thoughts. Because this is really, we live in a society that prizes independence, and yet we're totally interdependent. Totally interdependent. We cannot get along without each other. Had a guy get really, really angry at me. I thought he was going to belt me. When he was talking about how he was a completely independent, he didn't have to rely on anyone. And when I looked at him and said, really? So you drill your own oil and refine your own gasoline? Oh, he got mad. Because of course, he might have, and it might have been the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm. He already felt irritated with people, and he's so like a child.
That might have been it. But I was actually, I was thinking that I was being kind of funny. Now there's another example, humor. Be careful with humor. Yeah, be careful with humor. What you think is hilarious, others don't. My older daughter is getting married in a few months to an Australian. And we lived in Australia for a while, long before we had kids. And I guarantee you, Australian humor is not American humor. They speak English, sort of. Sort of. And they say that about us too. I want you to know, but they do. And but the humor is very, very culturally dependent, and there is an Australian culture, just like there is an American culture. Actually, there are many American cultures. I come from a mix of Irish American culture and Southern American culture. I used to listen to my aunts complaining about my mother marrying a Yankee when I was a kid. So we had, we got to listen to a lot of that. But humor does change. Humor is dependent on not only where you are, but when you are. The humor that we used when I was a young person was very different than the humor that I see today on, if I watch television. I don't watch television much at all, but if I do see humor, or if I go to a play, I remember going to a play one time that was supposed to be absolutely hilarious. And by the middle of the second act, I was ready to leave. It was pathetic. It was supposed to be about two people fighting. And there was no humor in it all. And the audience was just laughing and laughing and laughing. And I figure that's because the play was about their lives. And that wasn't the life my wife and I lived. So we got no humor out of it at all. And I remember watching a movie, August Osage County, which some of you may have watched, with Meryl Streep and Julia Roberts and a number of other people, about a family in somewhere in the Midwest, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Kansas, someplace like that. And it was supposed to be absolutely hilarious. So, we like to laugh, and so we got it. And about 15 minutes into the movie, I said, "Are you finding this at all funny?" Because it was just awful. The people in it were awful, and it just didn't make any sense. So humor does depend on a lot of other things, what you find funny. And so be careful with humor in any situation, especially if you're having a disagreement. That can be the biggest mistake you can make. Because, yeah, you're right. He might have thought I was making fun of him. And I wasn't intending to do that. But again, it's like, if I'd given it a couple of seconds thought, I would have said, oh, that's nice, and just left it. But I had to get in my zinger. And there's where thinking works. There's somebody who said, this was talking about, social media like Twitter and Facebook, write it out, but then think about it for 10 minutes before you press the send button. And a lot of times you're going to come back and go, delete, get rid of it. I don't really want to say that.
These were the possibilities.
Yeah, we just
Read
don't
it
like it.
out- Read it out to yourself. Does it actually make sense if there's something you want to say and you actually hear?
Yeah,
That's why it was good when texting required the like multiple pressing. Because you had to like really mean it if you were gonna say something. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you wouldn't
right.
like text out a paragraph
No.
like you do now.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. When you had to do that.
Essential information.
Yeah, that's right.
And
Exactly.
now it's all, poison with
Well,
all this nonsense.
Or you can turn on
Extra.
voice recording,
Mhm.
and that's when it really gets bad,
Oh, yeah.
because you don't listen to yourself. But that's true.
There's
I-
like interaction without communication.
Yeah. It was one of the reasons I didn't text for a long time. I was bored with having to press keys up to 3 times just to get, or even 4 up to get a symbol. Ugh, don't want to do it. So forget it. It probably saved me a lot of fights. But again, it's a matter of how you communicate and what you mean when you communicate. So what else? Certainly there have to be some other thoughts. This is not supposed to be the Mike show. Come on.
I think sometimes communication is like doomed to fail too in some scenarios because people are so scarred from past experiences or previous traumas that now their interactions are unstable and they don't trust them. So whether they try to interpret you correctly or not, they kind of can't because now there's this barrier of, basically like psychosomatic trauma where you're just associating it with these new people over and over again because you're just, it's better to, I know that's like a thing they tell us, like it's better, it's actually really unhealthy, but the whole thought process, like it's better to know it's gonna fail before it does. But then it's like, so it's hard because I think a lot of people in today's society are that way, but you're not perceived that way because of social media. You're perceived as like this bright, shiny, whatever. But in reality, that's not who you are at all.
Mhm.
Like who people see you as in the world isn't you. And I think that's where there's like a underlying miscommunication from the start. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I do. That's when, there are times, when you think, this can't go anywhere. And as soon as you have that first thought, what do you think you should do?
I mean, it's hard because how do you respectfully close a conversation that you know is a trigger for you? Like, I know I run into that where I'll like awkwardly let people continue talking about things and I'll just start to agree with what they're saying just so that we can get to a closing point because I know that it'll trigger me on like a whole other level if we start to actually engage, So it's like,
Yeah,
it's hard to apply communication skills evenly. I guess.
I'll agree with that. When I'm sitting in a situation, and obviously my life experience is different from yours, so my reaction to things is going to be different from yours. But if I'm in a situation where things are going along and I think to myself, this is not going to go well at all, I will at some time say, I'm not comfortable with this conversation. can we have it another time? Because I'm not thinking that this is good for me. I can't deal with it. If it's someone who is close to you, they should be able to say, okay. If it's not someone who's close to you, and it's going nowhere in a hurry, then I look for an exit strategy. And sometimes it can be as aggressive as turning my back and walking away, if I perceive that anything else is going to just make matters worse. I mean, that makes matters worse too,
Yeah.
but it might be better than, shut up, on that topic.
Oh, look at my wrist. Gotta go.
Yeah, I feel like I think when I was younger, I was really aggressive. When people would like step on my toes, I was really quick to lash out. And I think now that I'm a parent, I've gone through a lot of things. I think now I just have like a tendency to just box it all up and just kind of let everybody go on with their day and forget that I'm dealing with things. It's like an age thing. Like,
Experience.
we're forever
Yeah.
learning how to communicate
Yeah.
more efficiently.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
Age. Go ahead, Hope. Sorry.
I'm having an issue with a coworker. He keeps poking at me. I have no idea why. And I just kept my mouth shut, I'm going to get to the point where I'm going to lose it on him.
Yeah. That's interesting because, of course, the poke, is this physically just pushing at you or just
He's
verbally
just
poking at you?
verbally poking at me.
Okay. That's a tough one because it gets wearying after a
Yeah.
while. And it
And
gets you,
I'm the type of person, I'll avoid conflict any way I can. So I just keep taking his nonsense, and eventually I'm going to have enough.
so think ahead of time about how you might respond when you finally reach the point where it's about to break. Think about that ahead of time. Some people are really good with the zingers, and that's not necessarily great. But if you can find a way, let me give you an example. There's I don't know if you've heard about a man by the name of John Kabat-Zinn, but he's a man that has been in the self actualization movement for a very long time. And I'm going to use a little bit raw language here, and I apologize for that ahead of time. But he was with a guy who, every time the guy saw him, he'd say, "Hey, John, you son of a bitch, how are you?" And that was every single time. And finally, Kabat-Zinn said, "Do you realize that every time you see me, you say that?" And the guy looked at him and said, "I do." He wasn't listening to himself. And it never happened again, just by calling him on it. People don't listen. I mean, they don't listen to themselves, much less anybody else. But really, that's part of the problem. You get used to, you turn on a tape. I found myself, actually shocked myself because, I had an interesting upbringing. I'll just leave it at that. And I swore that I would never say certain things to my daughters. And one day the tape came on. And I found myself just going right there. But I actually listened to myself, but I didn't listen early enough. And it took some apologizing to my daughter for the things that I said. But I played a tape. When you play a tape, you're not listening. You've got it on play, and you don't know where the pause button is. And you won't stop it. So my suggestion really for that is to think about it now when you're relatively calm, and especially when he's not around, when you have a chance to really consider, when I finally get sick and tired of this, how am I going to get the message across to him that is absolutely unacceptable?
I was thinking of asking him, what is your problem with me? Why are you behaving this way towards me?
But I feel like that's also, you're acknowledging the fact that there might be a problem you should fix. And I don't think it's folks'
I
issue.
don't think it's my problem, I think it's
Right,
his.
but I think saying that could be misinterpreted, and I had a couple of situations like this before, and every time I regretted letting it get to me, like every single time. And so I feel like it's better. People sometimes don't have the stimulation that they're needing or looking for outside of work. Then they come to work and like children, negative attention is still attention. And I think sometimes people are looking to trigger someone.
Well, right now, my approach to it is
and
just don't even communicate with them, and it's got nothing to go get me about.
or you could even just firmly draw a
line.
really professional line, like, the next time he makes a comment, just, that's unprofessional and unproductive.
Well, he's not.
And, I mean,
I
if it's like anything that's distracting you in the workplace that another worker is going out of their way to do, it's inappropriate. So, at the end of the day, you calmly say something, and if it doesn't get resolved, you get hired. It shouldn't be a problem.
The
You
only
shouldn't have to
problem I
worry
have
about
with that,
it.
currently I work for a family, single family,
Yeah,
and they need this guy that comes from. So to go to my boss, I don't know would be the best idea.
yeah.
Well, I hope then, I mean, there's some ideas. Megan had some ideas and that really makes it, I think, more important for you to think about how you can approach it in a way that is non-confrontational and maybe points out to him that what he's doing is not appropriate. You have a right to demand appropriateness in the behavior of others, in the workplace especially. You have that right. And-
Like if you were to snap at him and the family
True.
were to take it as,
True.
you know what I mean, that could tarnish your view.
That's true. I was just thinking maybe the next time he says something to me, I say, why do you talk to me like that? Why do you do that?
That might be an opening. I mean, you don't know, not knowing anything about the guy, you don't know where he's going to go with that.
Right.
Again, he's constructed a story in his head about you.
Oh, I know, he's told me.
Yeah. And that story is probably a story you don't think is accurate.
Why I don't, absolutely, I totally disagree with him. but
Yeah.
That's his opinion, and I figure that's your opinion, and you're entitled to it. I don't have to agree with it.
But still that shouldn't interfere with the working relationship.
It shouldn't.
I know, it shouldn't. We're talking about, situations like that should or should not occur. It's not to say that they don't. It's not to say that a few choice words can fix it. Another part is, just don't respond. I mean,
So that's what I've been doing. That's been my.
that's your
approach to it.
avoidance
When
approach.
he behaves this way, I walk away,
Yeah.
or I don't communicate with him at all. Because if I don't give him anything to work with, he's got nothing to throw back at.
Other than what he's made up.
Right, exactly.
That's a tough situation. I hope that through the course of this class, this mod, you can pick up a few ideas for how to handle that
That would be
situation.
wonderful, because thinking I'm gonna get to the point that I'm gonna blow up on him.
Yeah, and
I
that
don't
doesn't,
want that,
no.
because that makes the workplace even harder.
and it doesn't make you look good. Then you make yourself the bad guy.
Right.
And that might be what he's looking for.
I don't know what he. I don't
Yeah,
know.
you don't. I mean, all of this is sheer speculation. We're talking about his motives, of course, but there are people that really enjoy making someone else the bad guy so that they can look better. They have this twisted view in my mind, because in reality, if we all looked good, that helps everybody. So but that's a different attitude. It's a different way of being. It's like any situation where I'll pick on lawyers. They're not a protected class. They're not. And we have a couple of lawyers in the family, and I pick on them a lot. So, but one of them is an ambulance chaser. That's how he made all his money. And he thinks he's doing a great job for the victims of these various things. And
But those people are just trying to help. They're just like innocent people, how they just-
yeah. And they, and I look at him and say, okay, you're going out and you think you're helping people, and sometimes he does. I mean, I won't argue that he's never helped anyone, but his motives are money, not really helping. It's all about money. And that dilutes my view of what he's doing. And again, my view. And I take responsibility for my view on that. Because of course, some of his clients think he's the greatest person on the planet because he's helped them. And, that's great. But still, I look at the whole picture and I see something different. So it's really, it's really different there. It's really something to deal with. Yeah, I just hope you can learn something.
Well, right now, I'm going to continue on the first month where I just don't communicate with him. I barely speak to him. So he has nothing to poke at me with.
Yeah, but still he does it.
Yeah.
So
Over silly little things.
that's a typical pattern for people who behave that way. If you don't give them a tool, they'll find something that you think is utterly trivial and use it. It's sort of like sticking a toothpick under your
I
thumb.
keep telling myself that's his problem, not mine.
Yeah.
Don't make it my problem.
And that's probably your best defense. But yeah, there comes a time often when we've had enough.
And I'll get there.
Well, then that's when you have to think about what is going to be your rational response.
I don't know that I'll say something right at the time, but he knows that about how irritated I am. Then I'll say something and regret it.
That's the thing I'd like you to avoid.
Yeah.
Really. Okay, let's then move on. The assignment for this week, which I would like to talk about. As I said, I haven't written this week's assessment yet. I'm still working on that. But the assignment is actually to write a 3-page paper. And I give you a choice of 3 topics. And this can be found in the description of the assignment in the shell here. So the importance of interpersonal communication, this sort of comes out of the beginning of chapter 6, and then the conflict issue, conflict management, whatever you want to call it, which is going to be the subject of the discussion overall, but it's going to be your style. So so I'd like you to research a little of that. Now, remember, you pick one of these 3. This is not 3 papers, please. Don't try to put all 3 into one. I want to be sure that I'm communicating this very clearly, because I've had people come to me and say, I can't get all 3 of these topics into one paper. No.
Reread it.
Yeah, please reread it. Or the self-disclosure part. Self-disclosure is the things that we know about ourselves, that other people know about us, and recognizing the things that we have hidden from others. All of us have things that we have not told other people. And different other people will know different things. And some of us maintain that because we understand that there are some things that we'd rather the world didn't know. All of us have little things we've done in our life that we'd rather the world didn't know. And we also know that if you tell anyone, you might as well broadcast it, because it's going to get out there. And I've had that happen to me professionally on more than one occasion, to the point that I actually, at one point, cut certain people out of my communication lines because they would use that information inappropriately. So, we do have things that are there. There are the things that are hidden. So we call those the hidden things. This comes out of the end of the chapter when they're talking about the Johari window, which is a 4-pane panel that talks about the things that are that we know about ourselves and that others know, the things that we know about ourselves that others don't know, the things that others know about us that maybe we don't. And the thing about the things about this description is that it is information that people have decided they know from your communication with them, both verbal and nonverbal. They make decisions about who you are that may or may not have any reflection on who you think you are. So it's what other people know about you that you don't. And then there's the things that nobody knows, even you, about yourself. We all have little things that we haven't, that we probably don't really know, and it only comes out when a circumstance brings something to the fore. Like when I said when I turned the tape on from my father on my daughter. I had thought that was not there because I had said that'll never happen, never happen, and bingo, there it was. So, those things happen.
When we write
So,
this paper,
Go ahead, Amber, sorry.
when we write this paper, do you want us to do like the APA format? So
Yes.
it's just titled every paragraph versus you having to find it, basically?
Yes, it is an APA paper.
Okay.
I expect it to be APA. It's down here and further down in the description here. Okay. And I'd like you to have a couple of references. The textbook can be one, and you'll find the full information about the textbook reference, because what you get here, and when you download chapters 4 through 7 during the course, you don't have any actual citation as to the author, the publisher, the data, etc. You'll find that in the syllabus for the course under the text. So you can use the text, but look up something else as well. Do some research, preferably through SHARC. But if you have other ways of doing the kind of research, some people use SHARC, some people will do their own searching. SHARC actually is really good. ProQuest is actually excellent if you can figure out how to do the searches. I'll be honest, it's not the most straightforward search mechanism, but use that format. So a title page. This is a short enough paper that an abstract doesn't make any sense. I don't know that any of you have ever used abstracts in your papers here or not, but one of the courses I teach has a 12-page paper associated with it. An abstract makes sense then. An abstract is simply a paragraph, 250 words or less, that summarizes the paper. Okay. No, the only class I teach that requires it actually is in the healthcare bachelor's program, the capstone for that class. So it will be that. Now I want to point out the Writing Center. We no longer use Smart Thinking. Some of you may have used it in the past when we still had it. We no longer use Smart Thinking. Sometimes it's hard to get to either Katie or Laura for assistance, or me, since I'm only here Monday and Wednesday. So the Writing Center online, you can set up an appointment with them and have them help you with your papers if you need help, or if you feel you need help, or if you just want another review. It's a service that we offer at the school. Take advantage of it. It will help you, especially if you're a little bit iffy about your ability to produce papers. And I know some of you do a good job of that already, but if you don't feel confident, do that. The nice thing is that they'll help you. The nicer thing is that it builds your confidence in your ability to produce these things. And quite frankly, written communication is going to be critical on whatever job you're on in your life. So we want you to do that. Okay, so that's the topics. The last topic, which I didn't get to, well, yeah, we talked about self-disclosure. So why is that important? Well, when we are trying to communicate with someone, sometimes the miscommunications come from the part of that Johari window that is either hidden from you. In other words, things that people think they know about you that maybe you don't know and may or may not be true, but that's going to be a reality for them. So a lot of times miscommunication comes in that way. Or you may find that your understanding of the other person is such that the method of communication you choose just doesn't work. Okay, because you too have ideas about the persons you're writing to, your written communication. And so aside from the easy things like grammar and spelling, I mean, that word can help you with that, although the word grammar checker sometimes is a bit weird. But certainly, and you have to be careful about the spelling, the their issue and your and that sort of thing. And so you have to go through. My suggestion is always when you're writing a paper, write it, put it down for at least a day before you finalize it, because when you go back to reread it, that's when you find things. I'll give you an example. I've written a couple of books, and one of them was about nanotechnology, and it was big. It was 325 pages. And I spent a year writing that thing. I can't tell you how many times I read it and proofread it and proofread it and did all this. Sent it in to the publisher. The publisher sent back the galley proofs, which I then read again and found one or two minor typos, sent it off. When the book was published, I got my copies from the publisher. I randomly opened the book and there was a typo. And I said, "Oh, you idiots." Now, there's my reaction to this. You know, I did all this work and you blew it. So I went back to, and I thought, well, before I scream at them, maybe I should go back to the galleys. And there it was. It was in the galleys and I'd missed it. So proofing is something, and in reality, I didn't have anybody else that I could turn it to and have them proof it. But you might have other people in your lives who can read your papers, and they'll catch things. And things get through. This morning in the professional development class, one of the things we do with that class is you go out and find a job opening, a job posting for a job you might like to have, and then we tailor everything else you do to that job posting. You literally apply for that job in the class, and you get a mock interview for it and everything else. So one of the students this morning chose one, and it was an online ad. It came off of one of the online services. I might have been Indeed. But I was reading down the job description, and there in the duties, they had the same duty listed as the second of a list of duties and as the very last one. Same thing, word for word. And I thought, well, if I were grading this, you'd lose some points, because you shouldn't ever repeat something like that unless it's deliberate for an important issue, you know. But it happens. It happens all the time. So when you're writing, you know, and part of the rubric for grading this will be grammar, spelling, you know, the logic of your argument, everything that you put in. So proof it. If you want the grade that you think you'd like to get in this class, proof everything. But the topics themselves are well written out. There are 71 pages. Obviously here, you're not reading the entire 71 pages. And in terms of, I suggest you do, there's a lot of good information, but these are on sections of that writing. Some of them are a little longer than others, but I don't think any of them are longer. Well, the longest one is the center one, conflict and interpersonal communication. The guts of that are the first half of that section. So that's your assignment for this week. I suggest strongly that you start on that. You don't want to be Saturday afternoon sitting down and saying, oh no, I have to write a paper and it's due tonight. And note that, late submissions can result in loss of 20% of the grade you would have otherwise had. Now, I said can. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be 100% happening for everything. But I do want you to try to be on time. Once again, we're preparing you for the workplace. When you turn in an assignment late at work, they're going to want to know why. And you're going to have a really good explanation of not only why, but why when you realized it was going to be late, you hadn't already talked to them about it. Again, communication. That's the key to everything. Everything we do is communication. When you're working in the computer field, you guys that are in the computer program here, you're communicating not just with a computer. You're communicating with the people that are going to make use of the systems you create, whether they're software systems, hardware systems, or some large other kind of project. You're communicating with the end users, one way or the other, and you have to be able to communicate with your coworkers that you're working with. Seldom are you going to be working on anything all by yourself. So you're constantly going to be communicating with your coworkers. You're going to have deadlines. You're going to have project managers breathing down your neck about getting things done on time. We had a friend who was a project manager, worked for Dish Network down in the South Denver area. And she just, that's what she did. She was constantly nagging the software engineers constantly about getting their work done on time because it was her head if the project wasn't done in time. So you're going to have that. In the medical field, you're communication in the medical field is real different because you're communicating up the chain of medicine to the MDs and nurses and others that you're working with, and down that chain to the patient. And the patient doesn't speak your language. And I'm not talking about Vietnamese versus English. I'm talking about medical versus English. And you have to be able to communicate in a language they understand. My wife is a physical therapist, and so she has a lot of medical information. We are the ones who can communicate to her mother about why the doctors are recommending medications or doing things with her. She doesn't understand. She doesn't have the vocabulary. She's never wanted to. So we communicate, in a 360-degree sphere around us. Everybody, up, down, sideways, all of our colleagues, people outside our organization. So we need to be able to do that clearly, both in writing and in person. And we need to understand the function of communication. So that's really a lot of what this class is about. We may go off on tangents now and again, and I hope we do because that is going to help us communicate with each other as well. And we start learning to communicate with each other, we're already expanding the boundaries of who we can communicate with. And because we're all different, all of us have different backgrounds. And I'm not talking about ethnicity here. I'm talking about just we grew up differently. I'm significantly the eldest person in this room. I've had a lot of experiences through times before, perhaps in some cases, even your parents were born. So I have a different perspective and a different way of communicating that comes out of a time when communication was different and how we accomplished it. But the same basic rule occurs, that the biggest problem is the illusion that it has occurred. Okay, so we need to be clear, and we need to learn to ask clarifying questions. If I say anything that doesn't make sense to you, I want you to interrupt me and ask right there, because that's critical to being effective in this class, and to my effectiveness and to your effective learning in this class. If I'm not saying something that's understandable, I want to know that so I can make an effort to find another way to say it or find a better way to say it. If there's anything I write, and sometimes I'll tell you, I have been embarrassed by some of my emails because I haven't gone back. I've been in a hurry. You know, it's 11 o'clock at night and I'm half asleep at the computer and I'm typing up an email that needs to go to the class. And then when I get into class, somebody says, "Did you really mean to say?" And it'll be completely off the wall. Not what I meant at all. And that's happened to me a couple of times. It's always embarrassing. I usually laugh about it, and we all laugh about it. But still, again, communication. And I shouldn't be writing at 11 o'clock at night on the computer. That's probably the biggest lesson right there. I hope I'm learning those. But okay, so this week we have a discussion. You have some reading to do. I want you to watch those videos because on Wednesday we're going to talk about the videos for this week and talk about the material. I'd like you to read through a good portion of this, if not all of it, because we're going to talk about the material in Chapter 6. I'd like you to get started on your paper. Make sure you do your discussion as soon as possible. For those of you who haven't gotten tonight's daily checkpoint done, please do it before you leave. I've seen that almost all of you have done it, so good. Stay up on those because you don't get a second chance at it. And I am not allowed to reopen one under any circumstance. So.
Are you allowed to unlock Tuesdays now, or do we have to wait until 12 a.m.? I'm just curious, are we not allowed to like kind of go ahead in this class like in the other classes?
No, not on the daily checkpoints.
Okay.
Other assignments, as I get them put together, will probably be given a start date of today.
Okay.
Even into the future. So as soon as I can get them posted, I will. But the daily checkpoints I can't play with at all. That's
fine. I was just curious.
Yeah. It is something that I have no choice in. So.
Okay. Stopping.
But thanks for asking, because I really, it does remind me that every time I get something done, I want to make sure that it's available immediately, even if it's not until next week. So I have no trouble with people moving ahead. You can already see what the readings and other things are going to be. But I will, when I'm ready to get other things put online, they will be. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Questions? We still have 15 minutes. So what I would like to do is open this up to further discussion. I know that this group has things to say. You've already shown me that, and I want to hear what you have to say.
The videos, are they in? Where are they at?
I'm sorry.
The videos that we're supposed to watch.
The videos you will find the videos in the readings and tools page in the first week of the class.
Okay.
If you scroll down, you'll find a whole series of videos that you can just play. Okay, find it?
It's under modules, Amber.
Okay.
Yeah, if you go to modules, and then
And then-
week 1.
Sorry, I was submitting the checkpoint.
Oh, the
Okay.
checkpoints are at
Yeah,
the
no, I
bottom.
went ahead and I was submitting that when
Oh,
you guys
okay.
were explaining where this was.
Okay, sorry.
You're fine.
But great, glad you did it. Yeah, if you just go into modules, the best way to get into anything is through the modules, because that's where your front page, your landing page for the class, the home page, just lists discussions, assignments, and assessments. It doesn't give you the other information that I have in modules in the weeks. So my preference would be that you go straight to modules whenever you get in, and look for the information. Each week you'll have readings and tools, and there will be videos. And that's part of the hybrid portion of this class. Hybrid means that you do a lot of the work. As you all know, as night students, you're expected to do a lot of work outside of class. That's what we call a hybrid class. And for the night, the structure we have for this, we want about 50% of the work to be outside of class, in addition to all of the work on your assignments. Okay, so there's a lot of work in all these classes. We'll do our best to make sure you have time to do them. Okay, so any other questions? What else?
Not a question, but statement.
Okay, go ahead, Chad.
Looking at the Johari window, it's very clear that left and English were not mathematicians. Because you have one axis traveling this way, the other one going that way.
Yeah.
For negative going negative going the other way.
Yeah. Yeah, think of it not as a Cartesian coordinate. Yeah, there's not a negative or positive side. None of those are negative. They're just aspects.
You have increasing openness one way and then decreasing openness the other.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you have to, you have to just look at really the titles of the quadrants of the window. Yeah. That, I will admit, I've known this concept, but I've never heard it called the Johari window before. So I learned something the other day when I was starting to read this material for this class. Well, it comes from the name of the people who developed it. It was something like Jones and Harrison or something like that. Ah, okay. Yeah. All right. So yeah. Just trying to be cute. People who develop these things, it's an ego thing. You put your name on it. You mark it. It's like a wolf. You have to mark it. And people do that. People, microbiologists will find a new microorganism and name it after their child or themselves. It's all about claiming. It's all about taking ownership of your discovery. And they do that.
Bless you.
Yep. So that's the work for the week. So we'll discuss the videos on Wednesday. So you'll need to watch them because I'd like to get critique and what you learned from each of them. I want you, the first three are pretty much stuff that's in your text. The last one is the TEDx talk from, I think her name is Celeste Fairchild.
Back.
Pardon?
Oh, sorry. No, I was just telling my son to put those back. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I'd like you to really pay attention to what she says there, because that's where she says that 93% of communication is nonverbal. She also gives a lot of other information about what's going on in the research on communication. And there's a lot going on, more than I ever dreamed. But then I'm a hard scientist. I'm not a social scientist. Not to say that social science can't be hard. It can. Anyway, one of the things I wanted to do was pass out to everyone a copy of this article I mentioned that we got given by my incipient son-in-law. Oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
You'll see Amber, that's fine. Okay, this article really talks about how you can change what she calls your narrative. Your narrative is what you develop when you're talking with someone and you decide what their feelings are. You can't feel someone else's emotions. Let's just be real there. Let's be real direct about that. All you can do is guess at them from their body language and the way they speak, the words they choose, the tone of voice they use. So we create in the process of any discussion a picture of the other person's thoughts. And unless we learn to ask what those thoughts are in some way, they start to grow in us. They take on reality. It's what destroys friendships, marriages, is this invented reality. And that is really something that she goes into in some detail here. It's actually a well-written article. I went and probably, I don't know, I hope I haven't broken any copyright laws or anything by providing you guys a copy of it. Amber, Hope picked up one for you. Stephanie, you can get it. It's listed in the readings and tools in week 1 as well.
Okay,
Right above the link to the chapter 6 itself.
perfect.
You can
Okay.
see. So this is something that is, I think, worth reading because it helps us with a better understanding of how we can deal with times when we're making up stories about what people think. And we make up stories about ourselves. We're good at that too. But really, when it comes to other people, we don't know what they're thinking. So we need to learn to ask. And she talks about here about a way that she and her husband developed to do that. So it's worth doing. So any other questions or comments? Well, in that case, it is 8:25 and I'm perfectly happy ending class now. And we'll see you on Wednesday. Yeah, I'm sure that you don't mind either. We'll see you all on Wednesday.
All right, thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thank you both for being online. I appreciate it. And Stephanie, I understand that you are likely not to be in All-Mod. Is that true?
Yeah, unless something comes up where I get a sitter, but that's probably not going to happen until next month. My daughter's only 2 weeks and daycares won't even take her until she's 8 weeks old. So
Right. Yeah. Understand. And your daughter's important. And you can get through this class easily by tuning into the Zoom. I
okay.
schedule a Zoom session every class and send you the link.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Amber, I hope things go well with your father and that we see you on Wednesday.
I will be there and thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. If anything happens and you can't make it back, just let me know.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye now. Have a good evening.
You too.